Right, well, welcome to Reconstruction, the Construction Index podcast. This is the first podcast of the year, and you're with David Taylor and with Phil Bishop, and we're going to have a discussion about three main topics today. What are they going to be, Phil?
Hello, David. The three stories from the news we've picked out to talk about this week are the latest ramifications of the Grenfell Tower fire, which is latest developments in tall building safety regulations. Then we're going to have a look at late payment reforms, that are latest proposals for legislation to protect smaller contractors from payment abuses by bigger contractors and their clients. And finally, we're going to have a look at the a survey that's been done of the online marketing activities and digital activities of the major contractors to see who's doing what well and who's doing what not so well. Well,
that sounds like a good mixture of topics there, Phil. Obviously, the Grenfell Tower story runs and runs, and the whole business about the fire safety of tall buildings is very much in the news all the time at the moment, in fact. But I think the definition of what constitutes a tall building is changing, isn't it? It used to be 18 metres and now it's 11 metres. What's all this about?
Well, there's always been a fairly spurious definitions. When we talk about high-rise for certain regulations, this 18 metres is taken as the measure. What brought that into particular spotlight was a fire, I don't know if you remember, in November last year, a student housing block in Bolton caught fire, and it was just a couple of centimetres under the 18-metre threshold. And as the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, told the House of Commons this week, said that it clearly showed that having a crude cut-off line for height of building is not good enough. You need to be a bit more subtle about it. And so he's now talking about for the rules and regulations pertaining to sprinklers, particularly that the height limit, thinking a bit about bringing it down to 11 metres instead of 18 metres. And this is part of a wide-ranging update he was giving on the Building Safety Programme, which is a government initiative set up in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire. It got an independent panel of experts. And we should say this is completely separate to the inquiry that the judicial inquiry that is going on. The government's own Building Safety Programme is trying to sort out what should be done now in advance of any prosecutions that may or may not be brought. And it's been really slow progress. After the Grenfell Tower fire, it became evident that the cladding system, so-called aluminium composite material, ACM cladding system, coupled with the insulation sandwiched between the metal cladding and the masonry wall of the building, contributed to the spread of the fire, and that's what made it the inferno that it was. It was not supposed to behave in that way, the fire, which is why the poor residents were told to stay put, because the fire brigade and everyone else assumed that the building would behave how it's supposed to behave and the fire wouldn't take off quite how it did. It turned out that it wasn't a one-off Grenfell Tower. There were hundreds of high-rise, over 18-metre residential buildings around the country in the public and private sector that had the same cladding system. And it's just taken ages to get these fixed. 2.5 years on.
Sorry, Phil, the thing which I find interesting about this is the figures of 18 metres and 11 metres. They seem to me rather arbitrary in many ways. I mean, how many stories are we talking about? How do metres relate to stories? And why is the number of stories or the height of the building such an important factor here?
Good question. I think 11 metres is about 4 stories, I imagine. Obviously, it depends to an extent on the building type, but that's the sort of height we're talking about. And therefore, 18 metres would be 8-ish, 7 or 8 stories. And I suppose the sense is that in a 4-storey building, it's how quickly they can be evacuated in the event of an emergency.
Okay, yeah. And this, so basically all the fire safety regulations, so that would be the requirement for sprinklers, it would be the type of cladding which you could use, the ingress and egress ability, those would all be affected by the change in this threshold, would they, from 18 to 11 metres?
Well, there was no mention in the minister's statement this week of egress and fire escapes and so on. What he specifically talked about was sprinkler requirements. He said he was minded to lower the height threshold for sprinklers in new buildings from 18 metres to 11 metres. And the other issue is the materials that are used to build these things. In December last year, they announced that combustible materials would be banned for use in the external walls of all high-rise buildings, which at that time meant 18 metres, and is now moved forward on that further, saying that the ban on combustible materials is going to go lower to 11 metres. Now, there does
make me wonder, Phil, why they allow combustible materials on the outside of any building. I mean,
well, almost everything will, not almost everything, but many things that we build things out of will burn eventually. It's the rate of burn and the impact of it and so on. But your point is well made. The Fire Protection Association actually responded to the idea that you can have combustible materials as long as your building's less than 11 metres. Fire Protection Association came out and said that their view is it should be banned on all high-risk buildings, regardless of height. And then we've got another unknown thrown there. How do you define high risk?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there have been some other developments in the field of safety, building safety, this week, haven't there? With the announcement that there's going to be a new chief inspector of buildings. What's all that about?
Well, it's not a chief inspector. They call it a building safety regulator. It seems to me that the idea is that this body, this person, and an office of building safety regulator will oversee the entire universe of building standards, which is fine. But it seems to me that when it comes to ensuring that high buildings or any building that's going up is being built according to legislation, surely that's the job of the local authority building control officers.
Exactly, yes.
And who are hideously underfunded, and half the time the contractors, the builders, are self-certifying an awful lot of stuff.
Yes.
And it seems there's a lot of confusion out there, certainly amongst clients, and particularly in the domestic sector. If you have an extension built and the builder says, well, you don't need building control for this because I can sign the form, love, and I'll send it in, and you think, okay, and I'm not completely on top of the law on it, but it seems I have been reading of occasions where that is allowed, but they don't necessarily always cross the T's and dot the I's correctly, and then it can land the homeowner in trouble.
Is this new body going to replace local authority building control? What would they be doing that LABC doesn't do already?
There's no suggestion of it doing that. I think it's, hopefully it will give power to the building controls. It will make building control officers, it will make their function more important and raise the status and the profile of it, I hope. It seems to be much more of a hands-off body. I don't think there's going to be an army of inspectors, but it is going to be within the remit of the health and safety executive, which is a sort of a strange beast itself. The health and safety executive has got the split personality where it's part policeman and part consultant. Its job is to advise industry on best practice and how to do things safely, and then it runs around catching them out and prosecuting them when it doesn't, which seems so
who's going to be behind this? Who's going to be heading up this new body? Do we know yet?
Well, the chair of the first person in post is Dame Judith Hackett, who was the woman who conducted the review of building regulations for the government. And
used to be the boss of the HSE, of course.
Exactly that. She chaired the Health and Safety Executive, or the Health and Safety Commission as it used to be, and then the Health and Safety Executive. And she's a technical person by background. I think she's a chemical engineer. So she has all the right clout and credibility and standing to do the job well. As she also demonstrated her report into the building regulations review. So she's going to oversee the transition to the new regime, and the minister is saying that they're going to start recruiting for a national chief. I beg your pardon. He did talk about a chief inspector of buildings, but it's going to be that job title will remain, I don't know.
Yes, it would be interesting to see how that works, if it works. When are we expecting to actually see anything done about this? I mean, it's been announced, but do we have a time scale here?
Not forgetting the person in post, but they say they're going to do a shadow body within weeks, we're told. Whether that's 125 weeks or 3 weeks, I don't know. I suspect it'd be somewhere in the middle, but Brexit was only supposed to take weeks, and things have a habit of dragging. But I can't see any reason why it shouldn't be. These things normally happen in spring. Governments like to talk, and ministers like talking to seasons, don't they? Because that's nice and loose.